want to talk about growth?
Yes, please.
Now, growth is, you have to be careful with growth because people would assume right away that, okay, all growth is good. And that is not necessarily true. The growth of cancer cells is not good. Really the question we should be having is, what is growth? But what is growth that is real? What is growth that can sustain itself? What is growth that, almost feeds on itself?
Yes.
We'll talk about the term emergent maybe in a while, but what is growth that will actually feed on itself in a positive way so that it's sustainable in the long term? It's something like I would coin what's true growth.
Yes.
If growth is true, then it has to be able to go beyond the tangible. That's what I would say.
Yes, because we can see that in agriculture, in that as we keep growing more in a monoculture, we have to throw in more inputs, more energy, more machinery,
Right.
more fertilizer, and in the end, we end up with Babylon.
Right. And if you're too extreme in your tangible growth, which
Yes.
says, I can create an isolated environment, then I'm going to pile in a lot of tangible things that can manipulate and control this environment over a short period of time, then ultimately that's going to run out. That is not real growth. At any point where if you can't extend it over, really outside of time,
Yes.
then it is not real.
So an oak forest is real growth in that you've got an acorn that makes it to a tree. Then fortunately, it has some other acorns go out, and there are other trees, and then in the end, you have a big climax oak forest that sustains a massive life system with many, 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 many other things in it for hundreds or thousands of years.
Yeah, that's right. And nature, you can look at nature in general and get a good, at one level, you can get a good example of what true growth is, if it's balanced, if it's got the right conditions for growth. But it's still very limited when you can put this to humanity, because as we tend to talk about natural growth, even animal growth, we think of it in a Darwinian way. We respond to our environment. Those who can respond to our environment the best in some sort of ongoing evolutionary mechanism will survive. So dinosaurs can't respond to it. So far the oak tree has, but at some point maybe oak trees can't. But whoever can will then become sustainable long term. There's always a carbon base to that. There's something that's measurable around that carbon base component of that will be sustained long term if we have that environment.
So there must be an ideal environment just for an oak forest, but also for people.
Well, this is where it gets a little bit more interesting from my standpoint, and I think people tend to equate the natural or the environmental evolution between natural things, trees, and so forth, with human, and it's very different. And there's been a lot of work done by Richard Dawkins and Susan Blackmore in this discussion around memes, and this idea of cultural, genetic structure is really the tangible component of what we talk about. The mnemonic structure is the intangible, and they describe that as really our cultural points as humans.
Yeah, because
we describe as right and wrong.
Right, because any animal has to adapt to a change in environment by growing hair, by a physiological adaptation, which is extremely difficult to pull off. We've done it through culture, haven't we? We got fire and learned how to put skins on. And
well, look, it's very clear from a human standpoint that our culture drives our evolution much more than our environment.
Yes.
Now, just look at you and I, Rob. I have a tangible. You would most of your observations of me would look at the tangibles, but most of my tangibles are a result of the cultural evolution of where it came from. And you know what? My tangibles right now can't keep up with my cultural evolution, and that's part of the issues. My background's Northern European, so if you think of this from a tangible standpoint, and the DNA that's been produced to survive within that Northern European environment, I inherit light-colored skin because I need to get the vitamin D out of the sun. My parents, you can almost say there was a natural selection of various body types. My body type, I'm a certain height, I'm a certain bone structure, In my environment, my DNA that's come out of that, I can influence that, 10, 20%, but I can influence it, much more than that, because I've inherited this DNA. And I've done that to survive. This level of DNA that I have allows me to survive in the type of environment that I'm born into. What's interesting is when you think about it from a cultural standpoint, when you think about the values that I also need to have to survive in that, I've probably inherited some natural forms of that as well. Physically, there's people that argue you need a certain combination of ectomorph, mesomorph, endomorph to survive based on our ancestry. The mesomorphs were the stronger, the ectomorphs actually had more endurance, and the endomorphs could survive the longest in a famine. So you had these basic combinations. Well, there might be some value equivalents to that as well, that help us understand, because it's intangible, what will affect the tangibles.
Yes.